Welcome back to AP US History. We'll call this material Chapter 6. It fits in kind of nicely there. Some of the contributing causes to the American Revolution. There's going to be a series of wars fought in the 18th century. You're probably not going to have to know too much about them for the AP exam. There's a remote possibility they might ask a question, so we'll cover. The most important thing that will come out of this video is that you need to know about the French and Indian War, the 7 Years' War. France was sort of a latecomer coming to the New World. They primarily came looking for the Northwest Passage. They discover furs. They're looking for gold. They do establish some trading posts so they can trade with Huron and the Algonquin Indians. And they're not interested in a lot of settlers coming there because it might just mess up the fur trade. And they only allowed Catholics to come. Samuel de Champlain will set up Quebec in 1608. And they established a series of forts along the Great Lakes. This shows a map of New France. In terms of significant things going on, well, Antoine Cadillac founded Detroit. If you've been to Detroit, we know who to blame. In 1701, and Robert de La Salle establishes some forts, but he will sail the Great Lakes and the Mississippi and lay claim to that area for the French. Of course, during this time, there's always seems to be some problems between the English, the French, and the Spanish. There's going to be 4 wars fought. The first 3 are going to start in Europe and spill over to the colonies. The last one, the French and Indian War, is going to start in the colonies and then spill into Europe. King William's War and Queen Anne's War, not too much to know here, except the French and the British seem to go at each other. Inconclusive. Neither side really gains too much from this. But nonetheless, it speaks of the ill will between France and England. The War of Spanish Succession pretty much is about who's going to take the throne of Spain, and France wants to back someone. In fact, they were hoping that Spain might just join up with them, but England and other countries in Europe have other plans. They felt that they would be too powerful. Eventually, this war is going to be settled at the Treaty of Utrecht, and no side really gains too much from the war. There are going to be some attacks made on English settlements in New York, but they don't really take over the colonies, the British colonies, and the British don't take over any French colonies. The French are going to ally themselves with the Hurons and also the Algonquins to fight the British, but the Treaty of Utrecht will settle this, and there will be a peace between them for about 3 decades, but no side really makes significant gains. King George's War again starts in Europe. Again, the participants are all the same, but maybe they've changed and switched sides. But it will spill over to the New World. So, New Englanders are going to invade New France, and they're going to take the city of Louisbourg. The war was inconclusive in Europe and in North America. The Peace of Treaty of 1748 will bring this conflict to an end. The British colonists don't feel any more secure. They feel that they're still vulnerable to the Indian allies, to the French and the French. Conflict is going to erupt in 1754, and it's going to start in Europe, United or the colonies. This is the most important war. The main issue was land in the Ohio Valley. Who was going to control it? The French claimed it, and also the British, in particular Virginia. This shows what North America looked like in 1750 and the variety of countries holding possessions there. The French have pretty substantial holdings in the New World. But this is all going to end in 1763. Churchill called this the Great War of Empire. It truly was a world war involving hundreds of thousands, but of people, millions of people. Estimated that between 900,000 to 1,400,000 people died. Pretty significant number. A timeline and things, events that we'll talk about as we go through here. Each one of these eventually leading up to the Battle of Quebec, and then finally the Peace of Paris in 1763, which will end the French and Indian War. But it's a very serious conflict. It's going to involve about 25,000 colonists. It's going to be fought on 3 different continents. How this all got started was George Washington was sent to Fort Duquesne, which was a French possession, to tell those guys to start packing their belongings and get out. There was a minor clash. George Washington was heading back to Virginia. He was overtaken by the French and the Indians. He's forced to surrender at Fort Necessity and told not to come back, and he promises that he won't. Of course, he was lying. He will come back with Braddock later on. In retaliation for the French being not so kind to Washington and his men, they removed 4,000 Nova Scotians to Louisiana, and it kind of explains why there's a French influence in that area. The Albany Congress was called. The Board of Trade called leaders from all the colonies to meet in Albany to discuss Indian problems, the French problems, and they also invited the Iroquois, which were their allies. Of course, this shows the first clash. The red, you can see the British forts, and the blue, the French. This is going to take place in the Ohio Valley and around the Fort Duquesne. Fort Necessity is built. Of course, the name indicates why it was built, but it's not going to be successful. Fort Duquesne is still going to remain in the hands of the French. This is George. He was sent to deliver this message to the French commander, but the French commander essentially says no thanks. Now, the Albany Plan of Union comes out of the Albany Congress, but fails also. So the first attempt, this Albany Congress that was really called by the British, is unsuccessful. The American colonists weren't too interested. Now, the other meeting that comes of the Albany Plan or Union is called by Ben Franklin and some others in hopes that they can unite against the French and the Indians. It will fail also. And the Iroquois say, now listen, we're not too interested in fighting the French. In fact, we might just trade with the French. This is a picture showing Benjamin Franklin's cartoon suggesting that if the colonists don't unite together, they will be cut up like a snake. So the Iroquois, who are the British allies, refused to fight. The long-range purpose, greater colonial unity against the French, was the whole idea of this Albany Union, but it's going to fail. Mainly because the colonists didn't want to surrender power, and also the British kind of nix it. General Braddock is sent to defeat the French in Fort Duquesne. William Pitt is the new leader of the government in Great Britain, and he sends Braddock over to get the French out. Over 1,400 troops defeated at the Battle of the Monongahela, and Braddock himself was killed there. George Washington was fired upon, had a lot of bullet holes in his tunic, but managed to survive unharmed. Of course, they weren't the most stealthful fighters. They kind of built a road and marched up to the fort. Of course, the French knew that they were coming. The French had a different idea, and the Indians, they fought behind trees and rocks and concealed themselves. The British, in their nice uniforms, were wonderful targets, and they marched right out in the open. Braddock is killed 10 miles from Fort Duquesne by about 1,500 French and Indian forces. So this makes things a little dicey along the frontier for British settlers. So the only real success early on was the British success expelled French from Louisiana. We also have the Cajuns there. War is formally declared in 1756. Marquis de Montcalm is on the French side, of course, the French being blue, and the red Lord Loudon is on the other side. He will be sent to kick the French out, but he's not well received by the Americans because he takes a dim view of the colonists trading with the French, which at that point were the British enemies. Native Americans were exploited again on both sides. But the real losers are going to be the Indians that align themselves with the French. So William Pitt will become the foreign minister. He sweet talks the colonists and says, listen, if you'll supply militia and materials, you'll be reimbursed for it. I guarantee it. Lord Loudon would be removed. Of course, the colonial morale increased because William Pitt makes some promises that he can't deliver. This shows some of the offenses, the battles fought along the frontier. This is the Battle of Quebec, the death of James Wolfe, and the British forces will be victorious, and they will sign the Peace of Paris in 1763. And as a result, the French are removed, and Great Britain emerges as the dominant force in North America. As far as the consequences of the war, the colonists emerged the war with increased confidence in the military strength. These shows you what each side received from the war. You can look at that. North America looks a little different now. You got two powers essentially there. One, the French are removed, and now is Spain and Great Britain. It increased colonial empire in America. This is what the British will get. And so, but they also get a huge debt, and they feel the colonists should pay for this, and they think that, man, we got to do some reorganization to get these colonists under control. It does unite the colonists for the first time, and of course there are some intense bitter feelings towards the British because they will start tightening the controls. And we'll stop right there.